so good that you're here. Thank you for coming. I appreciate your interest. Look at what I was impressed with this morning as I looked at the speaker schedule. 2 pages, and all the subjects are the same. I read them, and it was all one subject. They all have different approaches to the same subject, which is wonderful. That's the way we're going to get an answer. But we're the ones that have to do the work because nobody else is. And what is that one subject? If you read all of them, one after the other, it hits you that everybody is concerned about their health. We're worried about the health of our children, ourselves, and others, and the world. We don't know what's wrong. And we're all trying different theories, which is good. That's how we'll discover. But I'd like to suggest to you that there is a shortage of methods of study. We don't have the interos, and see, we're all really using related instrumentation to find our problems. We're using something called energy medicine. We're using concepts that involve frequencies from our bodies, perhaps different organs, or some other kind of sensing that doesn't use what the clinical system uses. The clinical system uses chemistry, and the only electronic thing is a voltmeter, which has other names, but it's still just a voltmeter. EKG and EEG, it's just a voltmeter that hasn't progressed in its concepts from the 1940s because it's always suppressed, Rife technology and other systems, and now we have one example, Intero technology. We're all sensing or becoming aware that there is another aspect to human life and life in general that involves frequencies, and so I'm suggesting to you that you learn one. Pick one, whether it's a pendulum or whether it's some other device. Pick one, because they are all related. Naturally, they're going to have different properties, and it has to be something that suits you and that you feel confident in. I use something that I invented myself because I happen to be a radio amateur, and therefore it would come natural to me to invent something a lot like a radio. So I have an oscillator, the kind that's used in every radio. And it's used in almost every other circuit too, because it's so useful. With an oscillator, you make some frequencies, and then those frequencies ride along with some other frequency that you don't know, but you're able to then calculate it. So the first thing I did with my device is that I calculated all the frequencies of the little things that I had in hand, organs on, no, not organs, but bacteria, parasites, things that, to my surprise, had a frequency. And I listed them. You'll find them in my lab manual. That's where the most complete list is. But what I'm suggesting here is that the perspective on this conference leads me to this conclusion that we are all very interested in health. That's why we're here. We need to have these different approaches. We need to make them blend. They're not contradictory, even though they don't have similar styles, and it's hard to know what the limits of any one system are. But every system has its limits, mine too. But I can detect things that are about 1 million times less than the best clinical device. The best clinical methods are immunological, and they can measure things that are down to around 1 part per billion and trillion. Trillion, yes, they can reach a part per trillion, but my system reaches 1 million times less than that. So if that's 10 to the minus 13, then I'm at 10 to the minus 15. So that is the best in existence, but that brings with it some kinds of mistakes. They're not really mistakes, they're errors. Every system has its errors, and if you can be aware of that, it's not your fault or anybody's fault. It's just built into that system of measurement. And you need to teach yourself what the limits of any one system are and try to find a way to reduce it. And this is a new science. All these are new sciences. Everything, including a divining rod, is still a science if you describe it and use it in a way that you feel confident or try to get confidence in its sensing method. Science is just observing something, using your senses, trusting your senses to observe something that somebody else will be able to observe also in some way or form. And keeping notes on it, that's science. So then you're a scientist as soon as you start doing that. And we need lots and lots of data. We have none, essentially none. We don't know what's causing the distress in our health for our children. We don't know why they won't eat. We don't know why they can't concentrate. We don't know why they're hyperactive. We don't know why they can't focus. These are fairly new problems, and I think that's why we're here. We know they're urgent because we didn't used to have them. And if we don't know what's causing it, we're pretty helpless. And the same thing goes for birth defects. When I was a parent, I was worried because the statistic was that 1 in a million babies had some kind of a defect. And I thought that was way too big. That causes a parent to worry. It's 1 in 100 now. It has skipped the 1 in 1,000. It just went through it in 40 years. We don't know why. We must come up with theories. I have my theories. Listen to them today, and I'm so glad you're here, because together, with an attitude like yours, which is open-minded, not so professionally closed, we'll come up with answers, and I'm looking forward to seeing them. I'm going to talk about parasitism today because that is one of my answers. We are dreadfully parasitized now, which we did not used to be, and I found it about 15 years ago, which is not so long. I wrote a book on it because it was so startling. I certainly was not taught anything like that in my biology courses or any medically related courses or anywhere in any book. So I had to write a book called Cure for All Diseases because I found that every disease had involved a parasite, something that was not considered believable. But since then, I have found it just to be even more true. Most of us have 2 major parasites now. In other words, parasitism is increasing. And I want to tell you the bottom line before I go tell you the logic of it. The bottom line is that our heightened radioactivity exposure, we have much more radioactivity exposure now than we did 15 years ago, or 20. And that is a very short time. I'll tell you where it's coming from, but it's radioactivity in our lifestyle that has increased our parasitism. I only came to that conclusion a little over a year ago, and I didn't say anything about it because I wanted to have data that anybody else could find. And if you have a device, please get started searching for this, for my sake, to show that there is some extra support for this. Every bacterium in us, and virus and parasite, is carrying the same radioactivity that we have in us. So if you're carrying an alpha source, radioactivity is either alpha, beta, or gamma. Radioactivity is all those together. Some radioactive elements put out mostly alpha and a little beta and gamma. Others produce mostly beta and a little alpha and gamma. Others produce mostly gamma and just a little bit of alpha and beta. And when you look at all the chemicals that exist, you'll see that there is at least a dozen of very radioactive elements. They come from below the surface of the ground in the uranium phosphate rocks. We're living on top of uranium phosphate rocks in a lot of places. We weren't meant to dig them up and throw them in the air for us to breathe, or put them in the water so that we're all drinking it, or sell those rocks as phosphate fertilizer, so that, as phosphate in the form of fertilizer, so that our crops get the radioactive elements, so that the grapes that are being grown and the grapefruit and oranges off the trees are now radioactive. That's shocking. It was the nightmare of the 50s, nightmare of the 40s and 50s when I was a young genetics student. We thought, oh my, there is a negative aspect to having discovered radium and other things that maybe engineering departments and chemistry departments will think, oh, marvelous, something new to work into our economy, something new to work into our chemistry, something new to work into our food production. See, most people think that progress in the world comes from having more to choose from, more to eat, regardless of many other factors. And we can't be that mindless about it. We have to test for its safety, even more than its nutritional value. And I'm going to recommend buying this little handheld device. It used to cost $5,000 during the last war. This is a Geiger-Miller counter. It used to cost so much. Then it came down to $2,000, and that would have been a bargain. Down to $1,000, and that makes it a bargain, and this is now $525. You can copy the source later. It's also going to be in the sources of my books, because I think this is the most important device that we can use. It doesn't require any skill except following the instructions. And I'll be testing a lot of things tomorrow at the demonstration. And if you have a piece of denture that's loose and can be taken out of your mouth, please scrub it up, dry it, and put it in a little baggie so that it's not considered a biological hazard.